en minut kvar, men jag tänker vi tjuvstartar lite och kör igång då med Calliditas Therapeutics och Renée, Aguiar, Lucander, VD. Kör.
Tack så mycket. So I'm actually going to do this presentation in English since my Swedish presentation skills still has something to be desired, if that's okay, and then I think we'll take the questions in Swedish. So anyway, welcome to this Calliditas presentation. As always, we're a publicly listed company, so I draw your attention to the disclaimer page with regards to filings related to risk factors, etc., and related to any forward-looking statements. So, Calliditas, we are a commercial stage biopharma company. We are focused on rare diseases, and we have a commercial entity in the area of IgA nephropathy, which is an autoimmune disease of the kidney. We've been pioneering that for quite a long time, and so we were the first company ever to have an approved product in this disease. In 2020, we read out the interim results, and we recently, in March, read out the full results of our phase 3, and we have the products approved both in the US and in Europe. In terms of our pipeline, we have a kind of first-in-class new platform with NOX inhibitors that we're running a variety of trials in. So we have several kind of phase 2 trials running. There is a PBC, primary biliary cholangitis, which is a phase 2b/3 trial. There is a Allport trial that we're just about to start, another rare disease in the kidney area. We have an investigator-led trial in phase 2 in IPF. And we also have a head and neck cancer proof of concept trial that we're running, not because we're trying to become an oncology company, but just simply because it's actually the simplest and easiest, fastest way to actually kind of look at the mode of action of this drug called setanaxib. And we're reading out the first part of that biomarker data, hopefully in mid-year, July-ish this year. In terms of the commercial franchise, we obviously have, it was developed under the development name of Nefecon. It's branded as Tarpeyo in the US, where we're commercializing ourselves. And in Europe, we have partners in the form of Stada, and we have Everest Medicines in China and Viatris in Japan. So, IgA nephropathy, as we said, it's a rare disease, but it's a fairly large rare disease. And so what we know is actually that there is a genetic background that's required, but it's not sufficient. So you can have this genetic background and actually not develop the disease. There are triggers that's required. Generally, this is diagnosed in your 20s and 30s, more common in men than in women in the Western world. And obviously, we do know that there's been nothing approved for this disease previously. Proteinuria is a leading indicator. The more proteinuria you have, the worse your prognosis is. But obviously, what people are most interested in here is obviously your kidney function, which is eGFR. So this is important, particularly for our drug, because it's very differentiated from any other drug that's being developed in this disease area. So the pathophysiology of this disease, it's a kidney disease, but as you might know, your vast majority of your immune system is in your gut. And so actually the production of these IgA1, these secretory IgA1 antibodies, is presumed to take place, produced by B cells that actually are in Peyer's patches, located, and the largest concentration of this is in the ileum, so in the distal part of the small intestine. And that's actually the target of our drug. We are not trying to target the kidney. We are not trying to kind of treat this disease systemically, because these are actually produced there. They then appear in the circulation. That is becomes an autoimmune problem. It creates large circulating complexes in your bloodstream that ultimately then, as the kidney's job is to filtrate blood. Obviously, they get stuck in these filtration mechanism, causes an inflammation, who then leads to kind of fibrosis and necrosis, and ultimately your kidney will no longer be able to filtrate blood as efficiently as it had before. So, design of the product. Is actually that we have an enterically coated capsule, which means that this capsule remains intact as you swallow it, goes through your stomach, goes through most of your small intestine, until it actually then is a pH trigger. It then releases these beads, which are kind of several layers of different polymers to ensure that it has a very specific release profile. So it's basically a combination of a delayed and a sustained release. It's delayed until it gets to its target area. It's sustained for a short period of time. You can see that at the bottom of this screen, in the right-hand corner, a little cartoon that tries to depict how that looks. And so this is actually to make sure you get a potent delivery of this drug in a very specific area. And it's used as budesonide as it's a reformulation. So this is a budesonide. It's a well-known drug. It's been used for a long time. It is a topical or locally acting drug. If you are trying to get systemic treatment, you do not use budesonide. There are plenty of other drugs that you can use, such as prednisone, prednisolone, who are designed to to be in your body for a long time and treat your whole body. This is not what budesonide's purpose is. And so we also know, and the reason is that it actually goes through first pass metabolism in the liver. About 90% is broken down. So per definition, only 10% of this dose will go into your systemic circulation. And obviously, every time it comes around, another 90% is broken down. So as I said, we've been pioneering this for a while. This is our phase 3 trial that we've been running. We started this actually in 2018, so we have been at this for a while. And this is the design, just to remind you. It's a global trial. If the final count in terms of patients was 364 patients that were included. They were treated, they came in on optimized and stable RAS blockade, which is ACEs and ARBs, which is blood pressure medication. They were either then given Nefecon, which is not branded, so Nefecon 60 milligrams a day or placebo. They were treated for 9 months, and then basically they were observed without being given any drugs for 15 months. So why did we do that? So obviously 9 months of treatment. There was an interim analysis after those 9 months. That was 200 patients. That gave us the actual ability to file with the regulators and get what's called an accelerated approval, which meant that we could start marketing this product in the market. There was considered to be a high unmet medical need, and that's why this was actually the first time ever that this FDA division ever gave an accelerated approval to anyone. And so this was really quite groundbreaking. And so that meant that we could go on the market whilst we actually were waiting on that. The observation period is there to say, did this treatment have a real clinically relevant effect on the actual underlying organ? Could we show that there is a real benefit from a kidney function perspective? So could we do that? And the answer is yes, we could. And so actually the primary endpoint of that trial it's a little bit complicated, so I apologize, but blame the FDA. So actually it's the weighted average of all the observations basically over a 2-year period. So it's an average number. So this basically shows that, on average, the treatment group in this trial lost about 2.5 milliliters per minute over that 2-year period. The placebo group that didn't get treated lost 7.5 on average over that period of time. So again, on average, the treatment benefit in favor of Nefecon was over 5 mils per minute, which is a lot in these type of circumstances. The endpoint obviously was achieved with highly statistically significant, so which was 0.0001, which means that this was a well-run trial with a very strong response. But if we look at the actual absolute data points, so not an average, but the actual data points, you can see that 9 months, which was 9 months after treatment, you saw that the treatment group actually had no impact, actually a slight benefit in terms of their kidney function. And what you could see is actually that the placebo group had lost about 4.5 mils per minute in filtration capability over that period of time. So you start off in life with about 100 mils per minute capability. If you get down to 30, your physician is going to start getting very nervous, and you should start preparing for that you will probably have to go into dialysis or a transplantation. If we then looked at, so what was the result after the entire 2-year period, you see that the placebo group had continued to lose kidney function, had now lost about 12 mils per minute over these 2 years, whilst the actual treatment group, though it had some kidney loss, obviously that it had shown that this treatment had actually generated a 50% protection of any kidney loss over that period of time, which is clinically extremely relevant. The other thing that we looked at obviously was proteinuria. This was our primary endpoint for the interim analysis. This was a surrogate marker that allowed us to actually get approval and be on the market. But this is obviously more of a symptom rather than the actual underlying kidney function measure. What we've seen was at 9 months in the full study, there was about a 34% reduction in proteinuria. This is a good thing. You do not want to have more proteinuria. You shouldn't have any, really, in your urine. whilst the placebo had lost about 5%. And again, after the entire 2 years of study, we see that actually the suppression and the reduction of proteinuria is actually sustained over this entire period of time. So it's very similar, it's about 31% still when these patients have not had any treatment for 15 months. And this, again, is actually clinically very relevant because it is, if all you're doing is kind of reducing proteinuria, so for example, RAS blockade, blood pressure. If you ever had a blood pressure medication, what happens when you stop taking your blood pressure medication? It doesn't actually necessarily, doesn't continue to get better, and it doesn't actually kind of continue to work. So in this case, we've actually shown that there is a durable and sustainable benefit, both in terms of proteinuria as well as the underlying kidney function. And actually, from a safety perspective, this is actually very typical. Again, this has been a drug that's been in the market in people for quite a long time. And what we can see is it's generally well tolerated. There is obviously a spillover into the systemic circulation. You will get some benefits and some drawbacks of that. But what you see is basically mild, mainly mild, some moderate, and very, very few serious kind of side effects that come with this type of treatment, and it is mainly kind of cosmetic and it's transitory. And if we look at some of these measures that you think because this is typical from this class, you would say that, okay, weight gain and hypertension, et cetera. But if you look at the actual amplitude of these changes are not really clinically relevant. So yes, they're reported, this is a very rigorous regulatory trial, but if you look at the actual amplitude of these changes, they're not considered clinically relevant by nephrologists. So what do we think that Nefecon actually has in the branded side in terms of both Kinpeygo and Tarpeyo? It's a target immunomodulator, as I said. It's designed to kind of locally really target the origin of this disease. And what we've shown is obviously that, in this combination with optimized RAS blockade, which is a standard of care, we can actually generate these durable kind of benefits for kidney, as well as then kind of keep this proteinuria kind of suppressed for a long period of time, which clearly is disease modifying. And it also has obviously a very well characterized safety profile. This is our kind of commercial in the US. So this is where we're commercializing ourselves. This is Tarpeyo. I love it. And so what do we do with Tarpeyo? So obviously we continue to work with education of healthcare providers, of interactions with patient groups. We have a very streamlined kind of distribution and sales system. We have a hub that basically all prescriptions goes into the hub. There is a kind of dedicated care team of nurses and et cetera, who will contact the patient, work with the prescribers, and try to kind of manage this process, which is called the US healthcare system. It is a lot of insurance companies that you need to deal with. There's a lot of administration paperwork. But we have now reached over 90% awareness amongst nephrologists. So they are starting to know who we are, what we do. We have 60 salespeople in the US. We have over 90% coverage in terms of kind of the US lives. This is Medicaid, Medicare, commercial. This is a heavily commercial group. So 70 to 75% of these patients are under commercial insurance. And obviously what we're looking at is this kind of increasing clinical evidence that results in peer-to-peer recommendation, in patient kind of stories that are successful. So I've looked at the kind of rolling 12 months in terms of this. So we started 2 months earlier here in terms of actually kind of selling the product. In January 2028 was the first shipment. But what you see is obviously in terms of prescriptions and in terms of unique prescribers, there is this kind of continuing increase. And obviously what you can see is over this period of time, we've sold for over 500 million Swedish crowns from the time that we were actually approved, which we are incredibly proud over. And obviously, as you can see, we are continuing to get that kind of increasing recognition in the US and increasing penetration. So very quickly in terms of the development pipeline, so this is NOx inhibitors. So these are enzymes that's dedicated only to do one thing, namely to produce ROS, reactive oxygen species. And this is one of those things where this is a good thing, it's just not a good thing if it's too much of it. So you need these things. They actually produce kind of collagens. You need it for healing of damages. But actually, if you get too much of it, it results in fibrosis. So this is an anti-fibrotic, anti-inflammatory in terms of mode of action. We've done a lot of preclinical work. A lot of this was done in head and neck cancer, hence that we're taking it into the clinic in head and neck. It's an easy translation where we've shown that we have significantly impacted tumor growth. We have allowed for tumor infiltrating lymphocytes into the tumor, and also that in terms of overall survival, it had a very significant impact. So this shows that this drug, in this particular setting and preclinically, actually kind of reduces or reverses fibrosis to allow some of these other kind of quite effective treatments to actually work, which they don't do very well today in a lot of solid tumors that have a preponderance of what you call CAFs, cancer-associated fibroblasts. That's what we're trying to kind of reverse or target with this drug. So there's a proof of concept trial that we're running, and as I said, we're going to have some matched biopsies of patients who had a biopsy before treatment, after treatment, and we're going to then try and look at this and see, can we see some indications from a biomarker perspective of how this drug actually works? And we believe that this will have a really interesting outcome in itself from a cancer perspective, but also more importantly for the rare disease pipeline that we're building. This will also serve to actually give us information on that. So an example, obviously I mentioned we're running a primary biliary cholangitis trial. What we're doing is we're having a phase 2b that we're running now with different dose levels. And actually the target is to select the dose level in the first half of 2024 and then move on with that development program. Last slide, and I'm kind of on time. So obviously, what are we going to do this year? We're going to continue to educate physicians. We're going to go to a lot of conferences with our data. This data has yet not really been seen by nephrologists because unfortunately they don't come to events like this. They treat patients. And so actually, we need to get something into conferences, abstracts, oral presentations. We're going to start with that in June with the ERA-EDTA. We're obviously also going to file for full approval in the entire population in IgA nephropathy with the FDA. What target is July. And depending on whether it's a 6-month review and a priority or 10-month standard review, we would get a kind of an approval targeted then for the first half of 2024, at which time we can then start actually commercializing the actual data that you've seen and the actual kind of benefit for kidney, from a kidney protective perspective, to actual physicians in the US. And then obviously in terms of the pipeline, we're building out more kind of on the kidney side. We obviously already have a very strong kind of organization in kidney, and looking then at the kind of interim readout.
Ja. Tack så mycket. Då skiftar vi till svenska en stund då.
Ja.
Tänkte, du var ju väl liksom långsiktig och berättade om caset här. Så jag tänkte vara lite mer kortsiktig i mina frågor. Jag fokuserar på Q1-rapporten. Där man såg att det blir lite snackis att antalet liksom enrollade patienter här, det ökar ju kraftigt kvartal på kvartal. Men det verkar som att intäkterna inte riktigt liksom hänger med. Hur förklarar du det här?
Alltså det här har ju mycket att göra med det vi sa tidigare lite grann, att hela det här systemet i USA är ett annorlunda system än vad det är i Europa. I Europa har vi den här liksom processen att det kan ta 1 eller 2 år innan du äntligen får ett pris i Europa. Men när du väl har fått det här priset så har du ju full access liksom till hela befolkningen. Så funkar det inte riktigt i USA. Utan du har de här problemen att du måste gå till liksom, flera tusen olika, alltså flera hundra olika så att säga, planer. Och i den här fallet så är det så 3 saker. Men det ena är så att säga, de här läkarna har inte haft så himla mycket sådana vad kallas för specialty products. Det vill säga du måste gå igenom den här processen med försäkringsbolag. För det är inte så mycket som har blivit godkänt helt enkelt inom kidney. Så där finns en viss liksom motstånd eller en viss så att säga, upplärningskurva kan man säga. Då så att säga för de här läkarna att de inte måste så att säga gå och liksom få de här mycket administration och papper som ska skrivas på och det ska godkännas och de ska få den här grejen. Och den tar vanligtvis, om man nu har liksom så att säga, kan den här processen ta allt mellan så att säga 1 vecka till 6 veckor. Att få den här liksom processen att liksom bli färdig. Och du kan inte egentligen skeppa någonting till patienten. Du kan liksom inte göra någonting förrän du har gått igenom den här processen. För det är de som betalar. Så därför så har du den här liksom inbyggda problematiken vad gäller tid. Och det andra är ju då helt enkelt att i och med att också läkarna inte riktigt är vana vid det här, men de skriver ut liksom sina off-label saker till patienten och så kan patienten gå till CVS och liksom plocka ut det. så funkar det inte riktigt här. Utan de skriver ut det här ibland för patienter som inte riktigt kvalificerar sig. De är kanske för unga, de har inte en biopsi, de har inga de står inte på blodtryckssänkande medel. Och då skriver de här liksom den här enrollment och så får de tillbaka de här frågorna och inser att det är ju inte ens någon idé för mig att gå och liksom fråga om det här läkemedlet eftersom min patient står ju inte ens liksom på RAS blockade. Jag måste göra det först. Så du har ju en viss cancellering som pågår eftersom de här läkarna, de måste lära sig också lite grann hur den här processen fungerar. Och sen har du ju den tredje biten då i USA som ändå är att alla människor har inte försäkringar. Eller har inte råd att liksom. Och så fungerar alla bolag i USA inom pharmaceuticals är ju då att det är ju vår uppgift i alla fall att se till att de personerna som verkligen behöver vårt läkemedel ska ju få vårt läkemedel. Det ska ju inte vara beroende på att de inte har liksom möjlighet att betala. Så alla liksom läkemedelsbolag har alltid en viss procent så att säga då, eller en viss andel som egentligen är så att säga, mediciner som vi ger bort. Vi ger de här till patienterna eftersom de här patienterna har ingen möjlighet att betala dem för överhuvudtaget. Och det systemet finns också i USA, har alltid funnits liksom utav, det här är ju så att säga en undertaking då så att säga som bolag i USA generellt gör när man har en specialty product på det här sättet. Så det finns liksom väldigt många olika komponenter. Så vi har ju försökt följa det här nu over time för vi behöver ju ändå liksom, vår behandling är 9 månader. Så att och det är väldigt svårt att ge någon slags indikationer på det här när man har massa nya patienter och alla liksom varit på liksom medicin i 2 månader. Vad ska vi säga? Genomsnittstiden för behandlingen är 2 månader. Ja, men det blir jättesvårt. Så nu har vi ju liksom kommit till den här biten tror jag att förhoppningsvis efter Q2 att vi har en tillräckligt lång tidsserie så att vi kan liksom, för det är ganska skilt liksom kvartal på kvartal. Så vi måste få en lite längre tid. Och jag förstår att folk är lite sådär, ja, de vill gärna att vi ska säga något sådär med en gång. Men vi vill gärna säga någonting som liksom vi kan hålla oss till och som faktiskt stämmer och som vi känner en viss liksom comfort med att säga att det här är liksom de lite längre trenderna som kommer liksom att fungera som ni kan hålla er till. Och så kan vi också visa kanske hur hur det har liksom trendat lite grann over time. Så att vi kan, för att liksom det går inte att säga att svaret är liksom 2,4. Det är liksom tyvärr det är för många liksom komponenter som ingår i det här systemet.
Just det. Men du skulle ändå säga att det viktigaste för investerare är att följa de här enrollments och sen kommer intäkterna släppa.
Ja, det kommer det att göra.
Ja. Mycket bra. Jag tänkte sista frågan, vi är lite kort om tid. Men Travere, deras Presentationen har ju lanserats nu i USA också. Märker ni av någonting liksom, när ni är ute hos läkare att de har lanserats? Eller?
Alltså, egentligen är det ganska tidigt.
Ja.
Alltså, man hör ju så att säga, det är ju noise naturligtvis. Så man hör ju om att liksom, läkarna har varit där. Och vi kan ju ofta kanske höra på hur läkaren frågar oss frågor om att de kanske precis har varit där och pratat med dem. Men generellt så kan man väl ändå säga att så att säga, den här marknaden antar ju vi alla att den är relativt stor. Så det är inte så egentligen att liksom det är liksom one for one. Det är inte så att vi har 10 patienter och vi ska slåss om de här 10 patienterna utan det är liksom ändå ganska så stort. Och det finns rätt många njurläkare. Det finns ju i alla fall kanske 10 000, 11 000 läkare. Så det tar ju ett litet tag liksom för vem som helst för båda två av oss att liksom ens nå alla de här läkarna. Så det är inte så att vi liksom ramlar på varandra direkt. Men däremot så hör man ju naturligtvis och fördelen med det är ju faktiskt att nu har vi ju fler personer som är ute ändå och pratar om den här sjukdomen. Och som faktiskt pratar om att liksom det här, nu har det funnits någonting som är godkänt. Och nu har vi också sagt att vi har ju rätt mycket awareness. Så det är inte det att läkarna inte vet att vi inte finns. Så det här är väl kanske egentligen, det är ju, från vårt perspektiv så har vi fått en jättestor salesforce egentligen nu. Som alla går och pratar om det här. Sen är det ju egentligen upp till läkarna att titta på sin patientprofil och i slutligen bestämma sig för vilket är det bästa preparatet, tycker jag, baserat på den datan som finns för just den patienten.
Just det. Bra, då är tiden slut. Tack så mycket för att du kom hit.
Ja, tackar.